Alright guys, so what we're going to do now is start to work on the register component. Okay, we want to get the form set up, we want to get our form state and all that. So I'm going to go to our dev connector bootstrap theme and open up register.html. I'm going to open it with Sublime. And let me just drag it over here. So basically all we need from here is the register area. Okay, so we don't need the footer, the nav bar, that stuff's already set up in our application. We just want to grab this div. And you'll notice that with this theme, I just tried to make everything as easy as possible to just grab and bring in. So we'll copy that, close that up. Let's go over to VS Code. Let's go to our, let's see, components, auth, register.js, and we'll go ahead and paste this in. And then of course we need to change all the classes to class name. So we'll Control D so that we can select all of these. And we'll just change to class name. And let's save it. And if we take a look at our application, it should look like this. I noticed the headers in this Bootstrap 4.1 look a little different, the headings. So I'll probably change all of the theme files to the 4.1 CDN as well. Alright, so now that we have our form displayed, there's quite a bit that we need to do here. So basically each field has to have its own state within the component. Alright, so to create component state, now remember we haven't implemented Redux yet. This has nothing to do with application state, it's component state. So we need to add a constructor to our class, and we're just going to run super and set our state. So we'll say this dot state, and state is just going to be an object with some values. So we'll have a name. We basically just want to replicate our fields. So we have a name field which will be set to nothing at first. We have an email field which will be nothing, just an empty string. Password, whoops, password 2. And then I'm also going to have an object for errors. Okay, and we're not really going to use that till later when we start using Redux. Now let's go down here and let's go to our first input, which is the name, and we want to set a value here. Let's go right here and let's set value, and we're going to set that to this dot state dot name. Okay, so this is pertaining to the state name value. Okay, we want to basically link this input to that state value. Now we want to do this for all of our fields, so I'll go ahead and copy that, and let's go to the next one, which is the email. And we can actually get rid of these requireds. I might even get rid of those before I upload the course, because we have our own error checking. We don't really need that HTML5 required stuff. Alright, so I guess the name was the only one that had it. So let's paste this in. This will be, the value will be this dot state dot email. Then we have our password and password 2. Okay, now if I go and I save this and we go back to our application and I try to start typing, I can't type anything in these fields. And the reason for that is now that these have the value of those state values, we have to actually assign a change event to each input. Okay, so a change meaning when we start typing, that's a change event. So we're going to have to go to each one of these inputs, and we're going to have to do this for every form in React, but we're actually going to create an input component, which I'll show you in a little bit. But we want to basically say change, on change. Then we want to run a function called on change, like that, this dot on change, and we're going to run the same function or the same method for every input. So we can copy that, and we just want to make sure we put this on every input. All right, now let's create that on change. So we're going to go right above the render and say on change. And this will take in an event parameter. Now, the point of this, what we want to do is whenever the user types, it's going to fire off an on change. It's going to fire off this function, and we want to set whatever is put into that input to these state variables. All right, that's the point of this. So to change state, to change component state, we need to say this dot set state. Okay, and the way we could do it is we could say like name, set state name to John. So that would set the name to John. But since we have more than just name, I mean, it's going to run for name, email, password, and all that. Instead of putting the direct name, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a set of brackets, and I'm going to do e.target.name. So for instance, if it's the name field, it'll be name. If it's email, it'll be email, and so on. And then what we want to set it to is the value of the input, which we can get with e.target.value. So whatever the user types, we can get from this. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, if I try to do this, it's not going to work. Let me just show you why. So if we go and I start typing, well, actually it's going to give us an error. It's saying cannot read property set state of undefined. And if we look at set state, it's talking about this. It doesn't know what this means. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to bind this. So we can do this in two ways. We could either go to each change event and we could say dot bind and pass in this. That's one way we could do it. Or if we don't want to go and do that to every single on change, what we could do is undo that and go to the constructor, and we can then say this dot on change is equal to this dot on change dot bind, and then pass in this. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. Let's go back, and now if I start to type, it works. And what I'm going to do is open up the console, and let's take a look. What's this? Class name. Looks like I have some kind of weird thing going on here. Class name. Right here. I don't know how that happened. All right, let's save that. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is use the React Chrome extension. If I click on that, I'm actually going to put this, I'm going to put this on the side. Okay, so this will show us our component. If we look in the router and we want the, what are we in, the register component, so right here. And then down here at the bottom, if I can bring this up, you'll see all of our state. Okay, our initial state for each field is blank. We know that. Now if I start to type in name, notice that down here in the state it starts to get filled. If I put in the email, password, confirm password, that's not the, each one of these is now linked to the component state. Okay, so that's what we want. Now once we do that, the next thing we want to do is add a submit event. Okay, so we have our form here. Now this is just, we don't need this. We don't need an action. So we'll get rid of that, and we're simply going to say on submit equals this dot on submit. And then once again, let's get rid of this quote. Once again, we have to bind this, so we can do the same thing we did with on change, except we're going to do it to on submit. All right, so we need to create that function, and we're going to pass in our event parameter. Now since it's a form, we don't want it to have its default behavior, so we want to take that event object and we want to say prevent default. Okay, And then this is where we're actually going to start to register our user. And ultimately we want to go through Redux, which we haven't set up yet. So for now, let's just console log. And we can actually, let's see, let's create an object here. We'll say new user equals an object, and we'll say name, set it to this.state.name. We'll set email, password, and password 2. And remember when we built our API for the registration, these are the fields that it takes. And we're actually going to send this to our back end. But for now, I'm just going to console log new user on submit, just to make sure that this works so far. So let's go ahead and put in, let's see, we'll click on our console up here. And let's say Brad. And submit. And there we go. So now we're seeing whatever I type in here, it's in the state, it's getting put into that object once we push on submit, and then it's just console logging it out. All right, so we have that part of the form all set. So in the next video, let's do exactly what we just did here, but let's do that with the login form, just so at least we have the form set up, we have the form state or the component state, we have the submit, and then we can think about actually interacting with our API after that.